into that. You may just have to consider that and find out what the madrasas are. But of course, also based on the terrorism financing risk assessment findings, the country is now committed to apply focused and proportionate measures in line with the risk-based approach to such NGOs to protect them from terrorism financing abuse, because we could not do anything without conducting this risk assessment and knowing exactly what we are dealing with. So NGO Bureau being the regulator of the sector, we have fully embraced these amendments and also this revision of Recommendation 8. And there are three key things that we're already doing that are very key. First, of course, is we're increasing awareness or outreach programs targeting the NPO sector, in particular those identified as posing high terrorism financing risks. The second one is that we are strengthening interagency coordination and cooperation to support impartial countering of financing of terrorism, intelligence gathering, investigations, prosecution, and confiscation of assets of those identified to be involved in terrorism financing. Because as a regulator, we cannot work in isolation. We need to involve all the other organs that are in place in the government and in the different sectors so that we are working as a team for the good of the country as a whole. But of course, the third one is that we are increasing the capacity of the NGO Bureau to provide effective oversight function of the NPO sector in matters related to countering or financing of terrorism, following the risk-based approach, because strengthening the capacity of the regulator is very key. But of course, one of the key issues which of course had been asked to talk about was how are we striking a balance between effective regulation framework and over-regulation, because there have been so many concerns that actually led to the revision of Recommendation 8 that a number of governments are now over-regulating in the name of now this whole terrorism financing thing. Now, as Uganda, we have done a couple of things. The first one is that after we completed the risk assessment that we finally launched and we are using right now, that of course we feel is not enough, because if we only stop at the risk assessment and we assume that the current position is giving us is what is enough, and we continue to operate, you never know, we may start assuming some things. So one first key thing that we are doing to strike that balance between effective regulation and avoiding over-regulation is by regularly updating the NPO risk assessment. Because after you conduct it, you need to also know that these risks are very dynamic and keep changing. Because today, the risk may say the risk level is low. Tomorrow it may move to medium. Tomorrow it may move to high. And so it's important that you continue regularly conducting this, because the status quo always keeps changing. So there is need for us to keep updating regularly this risk assessment. As Uganda, to update all the participants present. Next financial year, mainly in the second half of that financial year, we are planning to conduct an update of the current risk assessment that was conducted, so that we are not assuming the risk levels, because it's some of these assumptions that actually lead to over-regulation. You start assuming that maybe there's a threat in this area, and maybe let me take these actions, and yet it's important that you continue updating this risk assessment. So that's what we're going to do. The second thing which we are doing to strike that balance is, of course, reviewing our laws. Because at the time we conducted this assessment, the NGO Act 2016 that we're using, and also the policy, and I'm sure also the anti-money laundering laws already in force. So it's important that, taking this into account, we need actually to review our laws. To update all the participants present, Uganda is already in the process of reviewing its NGO Act 2016 and also reviewing the policy 2010. And in reviewing, we are going to ensure that whatever we are reviewing also has a bearing on the risk assessment findings and recommendations, because we did not just conduct those risk assessments as a formality. We conducted them so that their findings and recommendations have a bearing on any amendments or reviews in the laws that we're going to make. But of course, as part of the process, we have already conducted a regulatory impact assessment. And that was completed in November last year. And the risk-based approach is being incorporated in the law. And so we hope that by the time we complete the process, all this is taken into account. But of course, as we are reviewing the law, we're also fully aware that not all the NPOs are affected, and also that not all the NPOs are high risk. So it's important that we're only going to pay attention on a subsection, just the way the revised recommendation 8 is calling upon all of us to actually conduct this. But of course, the other one is that the law is mainly there to help mitigate the measures. The law is not there to punish anyone and actually put very hard conditions that frustrate operations of NPOs, but it's there to mitigate those measures. The third one is that as the NGO regulator, we also have a comprehensive outreach plan to raise awareness so that that awareness helps us strike this balance. And of course, the awareness starts number one with all the staff of the NGO Bureau. So far, we have conducted a couple of trainings for our staff. We have involved our Financial Intelligence Authority to assist us in doing that so that all the staff can draw a line between effective regulation and overregulation so that we know the do's and don'ts and where to draw the line. But of course, this training, we are not only stopping with the staff of the NGO Bureau. We're also going to extend it to the NGOs, and of late, we actually advise that even the donors, we thought already full aware of all these issues, need some training. So in addition to the NGOs, we are also going to extend it to the donors. For the NGOs, we're already doing it. And we hope that for the donors, we shall also start doing because we have not yet started that bit. But of course, we're also going to keep regularly updating our outreach plan because the plan that was there at the time the risk assessment was conducted is not the same one that we can continue using. So after some period, we shall keep updating this outreach plan. But also, we are continuing to hold joint outreach activities with our Financial Intelligence Authority. We do a lot of activities together. We even actually have staff who are allocated to ensure that they're following and championing some of these activities. But of course, also our biggest focus here in this outreach plan is to focus on bridging the knowledge gap. And we are doing this through national dialogues, through reflection meetings in the regions. We are doing this through community dialogues where we go to the grassroots, both the NGO Bureau and the Financial Authority, and we have discussions with all the NPOs and the actors so that people are drawing that line between effective regulation and not crossing into overregulation. So all these approaches we are following are both at the national, regional, and the community levels. The fourth thing we are doing to also avoid overregulation is also to thoroughly analyze the annual returns that are coming from these NPOs. These NPOs apply, they have the freedom to give you any information, but it's important that you verify the information that they're willing to you. So we always thoroughly analyze them so that we are drawing well-informed decisions on any action that we have to take against an NPO. And we are doing it so that we don't cross into that arena of overregulation. But of course, the fifth one that is very key is automation. We are coming from a background where our systems have been manual. So we are aggressively trying to automate all our systems. And of course, this is supposed to address the fatigue in the multiple reporting and also the regulation. And I think overregulation mainly springs from the lack of automated systems, especially where so many stakeholders are demanding for almost the same information and you have to run all over the place to fully comply with them. So to address that over-regulation, we are trying to automate all our systems. But of course, it's also important that this also is there to help us establish the level of compliance, but also to promote transparency and accountability so that the more automated our systems are, the more we are sure that the sector is going to become more compliant in whatever they're doing. Of course, the sixth one that we are doing to help us strike that balance, we are also having targeted risk-based supervision and monitoring of NPOs. Our departments at the NGO Bureau, the inspections and the M&E all have been fully trained on how to adopt the risk-based approach, meaning that they are now applying the risk-based supervision in everything they're doing. But also in addition to that, they also have very clear risk-based supervision frameworks in place. They have the strategy, they have the plan, and they have the manuals that guide the operations, because you don't want them to go out there and abuse the actions they are trying to execute as they're trying to do the right thing for the good of everyone in the country. The seventh one, of course, is that we are using a wide range of sanctions in case of violation. I know the NPO actors do not want to hear the word sanctions, but sanctions are a word that a regulator cannot avoid because it's very, very important. However, the sanctions at the NGO Bureau are divided into two categories. The first one is that we start with what we call remedial actions, both for the on-site and off-site engagements we have, whereby for any violations that we come across, whether it is a non-compliance issue, we always look at the gravity of what the issue is. We always engage you and give you an opportunity to put it right. That means that we put timelines where we communicate to you and request that you address any compliance gaps. As NGO Bureau, at times, if we note anything, we first give you a week, and that's a 5-day working period for you to put things right before we know what to do after that. But of course, sanctions, as I've said, is something which the sector does not want to hear. And I've strongly emphasized that that's not our first remedy in anything we are doing, because I'm very convinced that even what promoted and provoked the whole revision of Recommendation 8 was the abuse of some of the sanctions. So as NGO Bureau and Uganda as a whole, we are not using sanctions as our first remedy. It is the remedial actions that we start with, and after you fail, as a regulator, then we move to the next level now to use both civil and administrative sanctions. And of course, the moment we come across any criminal elements in whatever has been picked by our team from the inspection and the M&E departments, then we share that information with the Financial Intelligence Authority or even any law enforcement agency, because criminal issues now move out of our docket. That means we now bring the police, we bring other investigative arms so that they now take and prosecute. So our focus here is not on sanctions, but behavior change, because we are not here to kill the NPO sector, but we want them to behave in a way that will help protect this country from abuse from either terrorists who want to take advantage of the sector as a conduit to actually finance and execute the activities in the country. The eighth one is that also we want to develop best practices that are in line with what FATF has put. For now, Uganda has not yet done it, but we want to actually carry it out as a way of striking that balance, because the best practices are going to help us. And we do not want to do it alone as the government arm, but we want to involve the sector in doing it. We want to use the FATF best practices, mainly the amendments they made in November is what we are going to use. We're going to use it to refine and look within so that we customize one for Uganda as a whole. But the ninth area of trying to strike a balance, of course, is that we want to put in place a risk-based supervisory plan. And we already have customized M&E and inspections for this risk-based approach for both the on-site and off-site actives. And this helps us to identify the high-risk NPOs. And that falls exactly in line with what the revised Recommendation 8 is calling for, that you do not assume all the NPOs are high risk. So this risk-based supervisory plan is going to help us. And the last one is, of course, establishment of an anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism unit within our legal department at the NGO Bureau. Now, we need a unit because there are so many departments at the NGO Bureau doing different things. And in order to ensure that we are not crossing some lines, we need a particular unit that addresses this. We already have the unit within the legal department, and we have a staff who is fully responsible for that. Part of the areas I was also told to focus on was also to see the role of the regulatory authorities evolving to harmonize risk-based approach and non-disruptive oversight of the sector operations across the region, meaning that we try and look at the region as a whole and not Uganda. So I think the role of the regulatory authorities evolving to fully take on board the harmonized risk-based approach and the non-disruptive oversight of the sector across the region, to us as a regulator, is very crucial, and it offers a number of benefits. So I'm mainly going to focus on the benefits from the way we see it. First one is the consistency and the efficiency. That a harmonized approach within the region ensures consistency in risk assessment and management practices across different countries in the region, which leads to great efficiency in identifying, evaluating, and mitigating risks within the region. It also allows for the sharing of the best practices and lessons learned within the region, but also reducing duplication of efforts and resources within the region. The other area is that there's also enhanced collaboration and cooperation within the region, whereby a harmonized approach fosters collaboration and cooperation amongst countries in the region. By aligning the risk assessment methodologies and frameworks, it becomes easier to exchange information, share data, coordinate efforts in addressing common risks and challenges. And this collaboration can lead to more effective risk mitigation strategies and improved regional resilience. But of course, the third one also is there is improved risk communication, meaning
Mr.
that harmonization.
Hopefully you are wrapping up.
Yes. I'm
Sure.
trying to move as fast as I can to really wrap up. So this harmonized risk communication facilitates clearer and more effective risk communication. And when this risk assessment and management practices are consistent, then it becomes easier to communicate risks to all stakeholders within the region. So the other one, of course, it strengthens resilience, and of course, it facilitates a lot of things within the region. So in conclusion to everything that I have already presented, ladies and gentlemen, and all the participants present, I hope you have found these updates from Uganda and in particular the NGO Bureau very helpful in understanding the determination and the commitment of the NGO Bureau as a regulator in Uganda to implement the revised Recommendation 8, but of course also that the implementation of Recommendation 8 presents a future with no unintended consequences to the misapplication of the FATF Recommendation 8 standards, and also that it's important that we build a strong NGO sector that is protected against abuse by wrong elements, and also to promote an enabling environment. And this is something which the NGO Bureau cannot do alone, but it is a shared responsibility to both other stakeholders in the government, but also now that we are looking at the region and Africa as a whole, it's important that all stakeholders are fully on board. So the evolving role of the regulatory authorities in ensuring that there is non-disruptive oversight involves striking that balance between the oversight and promoting transparency and accountability, and also facilitating collaboration. By doing so, they also contribute to the growth and effectiveness of the NPO sector. So overall, much as we put in place all these measures that are put forward, it's important that we are having very proactive measures in place and not having reactionary measures, so that we're also protecting the sector that is complementing the government as a whole. So, Moderator Yona, I hand over back to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Stephen Okello. That has been a robust highlight, captured areas of striking a balance, laid out Uganda's implementation framework for the revised Recommendation 8, but also highlighted other areas that creatively you are going to use in implementing the revised Recommendation 8. Colleagues, feel free to begin typing in your questions in the chat room. We should be able to see them, and the panelists shall be happy to respond. Already, Mr. Stephen Okello has gotten a question in the chat room. So from Frederick Sokado, we shall be able to, again, invite him back to respond to some of the questions. So whoever has a question, please use the chat room. Without wasting time, allow me take again the opportunity and honor to invite one of our comrades from Zambia, based in Lusaka, but playing a similar role like Mr. Stephen Okello. Mr. Mketeke, you're welcome and have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yona, for that introduction. And
great.
Again,
just in case the video might disrupt you, you can turn off the video and you speak via the mic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, and that's what I wanted to request. Thank you for coming to my aid in that manner. I appreciate it. So I will speak without the video. Thank you for understanding. Yeah, so I was saying thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this very important meeting for knowledge sharing regarding the updates that have been made by FATF regarding recommendation 8. And I first of all, just to by way of introduction again, to say my name is Muketeke Mwarusambo, Chief Standards Officer at the Department of Registrar for Non-Government Organizations under the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services. The ministry, of course, is responsible for regulation of NGOs generally, and also regarding matters to do with terrorist financing as required under Recommendation 8. And just to mention that, obviously, as a government, the ministry obviously appreciates the role of non-government organizations in the national development process. And the ministry focuses on facilitating the operations of NGOs to ensure that they supplement government efforts in the national development process. And so, like my colleague has mentioned, we appreciate this opportunity that we can also be able to learn and share our experiences regarding this important assignment, this important engagement in terms of sharing information regarding implementation of Recommendation 8. I also want to share our special thanks to Yona. I think we are very grateful for this opportunity, and also DPI for the invitation to participate. I know the desire and the focus of DPI in terms of ensuring that regulators and NPOs meet regularly to discuss these matters, to ensure that we create a conducive environment for operations of NGOs in the countries involved. And so we are very grateful for this opportunity. Just to mention that in Zambia, we have a framework for implementation of Recommendation 8 as well. I will not go into details of what has already been highlighted, but we obviously take note that the FATF update to the Recommendation 8 requires that we focus more on providing oversight and monitoring regarding implementation of risk-based approach to protecting of NGOs from terrorist financing abuse. It has been highlighted, obvious that in some cases, implementation of these requirements has led to over-regulation and based on misinterpretation, or maybe using the FATF recommendation for other purposes apart from what FATF has intended to do. And it has obviously in some cases brought about unintended consequences to the FATF Recommendation 8. And so FATF is interested in making sure that it all the time clarifies. And so we appreciate these updates and meetings as this one very helpful in ensuring that we all update each other and work together in ensuring that we implement this requirement accordingly. So in Zambia, by way of highlighting how the AMLCFT framework is that we have various laws that provide for this implementation of Recommendation 8, and specifically protection of NGOs against terrorist financing. And so, for instance, we have the Prohibition and Prevention of Money Laundering Act as amended. This one establishes the Anti-Money Laundering Authority. And so this is the authority that makes policy around money laundering and terrorist financing. The other law that we have is the Anti-Terrorism and Non-Proliferation Act number 6 of 2018. Of course, it was amended in 2023. It establishes the National Anti-Terrorism Center. This also criminalizes terrorism financing and proliferation, and provides for targeted financial sanctions. The Financial Intelligence Center Act, as well, of 2010, as amended in 2020, also establishes the Financial Intelligence Center and provides for receiving, requesting, analyzing, and dissemination of suspected money laundering, terrorist financing, as well as other serious offenses. And now we also have the NGO Act, that's the Non-Governmental Organization Act number 16 of 2009, as amended in 2020, which establishes the Department of Registrar for NGOs, where I come from, of course, and provides for implementation of measures to protect NGOs from terrorist financing abuse. And so these are the, in addition to others, these are the principal acts that provides for regulation of NPOs related to terrorist financing, or the AMLCFT regime in the country. And like I mentioned, we have the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, which is a policy-making body. Below that, we have the National Task Force of Senior Officials, which is the implementing body of the policies made by the Anti-Money Laundering. And this is where we have relevant competent authorities that are involved in the fight against terrorist financing and money laundering. So we meet regularly, the task force meets regularly and implements all matters related to terrorist financing, money laundering. And just to mention that the Anti-Money Laundering Authority is actually at the moment chaired by the Attorney General. Just to give a brief background regarding the compliance of Zambia to Recommendation 8, from the last mutual evaluation, which was undertaken in 2019, the report, which is the SAMNAC report of 2019 for Zambia, Zambia was rated partially compliant to Recommendation 8. And mainly, the major deficiencies were that we had not undertaken a comprehensive risk assessment in order to identify the risks associated with the NPOs in the country. And also we had not done targeted outreach to the sector, both the NPOs and the donor communities. And of course, because we had not done the risk assessment, we had not implemented the risk-based approach to monitoring of the NPO sector. And so it applied like everything else was treated the same, all the NPOs were treated the same. And so risk-based approach was not implemented. And so that is why we were partially compliant. Of course, we moved in to amend the laws so that they begin speaking to terrorist financing and risk-based measures to be implemented. That is why the Non-Governmental Organizations Act of 2009 was amended in 2020 to provide for monitoring of NPOs or implementation of measures to protect NPOs from terrorist financing abuse. In terms of just to give a brief on the NPO regulatory framework in Zambia, we have different types of NPOs in Zambia and laws that regulate NPOs directly. I already mentioned the Non-Governmental Organization Act number 16 of 2009, where we have the registrar of NGOs. We also have the Societies Act, Cap 119, where we have the registrar of societies. Here we register different societies. We also have the Patents and Companies Act, which registers also NPOs in form of companies limited by guarantee. We also have the National Youth Development Council, which focuses on registering youth organizations, as well as the Persons with Disability Act, which focuses on registering disability organizations focusing on disability matters. And so we have this framework, but the Department of Registrar for NGOs under the NGO Act is responsible for coordination of matters related to TF from the regulatory point of view, of course, working together with other competent authorities, the Financial Intelligence Center, as well as the National Terrorism Center and other stakeholders. So in terms of the different types of NPOs, like I indicated, we have NGOs, which mainly in terms of FATF definition, so most of these, they fall under the FATF definition. We also have the community service societies under the Societies Act, religious organizations. My colleague from Uganda also mentioned about these religious organizations. We also have youth organizations, disability organizations, and the companies limited by guarantee. We have a number of registered organizations. For instance, as at the moment, we have about 17,000 NPOs. Of course, because we have been undertaking the process of risk assessment, we are able in the process now to identify that out of these 17,000 NPOs, only about slightly above 4,000 fall within the definition of the FATF definition of an NPO as we know it. And so these NPOs are regulated under these different authorities, but for purpose of TF, for terrorist financing, monitoring, the Department of Registrar for NGOs is responsible for coordinating this aspect. And in terms of how then now are we adapting to or planning to adapt to these revised changes? As we've seen, the revised changes requires that countries should be able to identify the risks associated with NPOs, because FATF has already made it very clear that not all NPOs are at risk of terrorist financing, and there's need for countries to identify the subset of NPOs that are at risk of terrorist financing. Once that is done, then we are able to implement risk-based measures. And so in line with that requirement, the country has been working on ensuring that we comply with this requirement. In 2016, firstly, national risk assessment was undertaken, but the NPO sector was not adequately assessed. We then had a sector risk assessment in 2020, which also had its own limitations in terms of the processes and the methodologies and involvement of all the relevant stakeholders. And so based on the lessons learned, we received support as a country from the EU Global Facility in order to undertake a comprehensive risk assessment of the NPO sector. And currently, we are undertaking the risk assessment for NPOs in Zambia in order to identify the subset of NPOs that is at risk of NPO from the overall NPOs in the country, so that we are able now to implement focused measures in terms of oversight and monitoring to avoid disruption of activities of NGO by undertaking monitoring or supervision of NPOs that is not risk-based. And so we appreciate the guidance by FATF that we need to ensure that we identify the NPOs at risk, so that the rest of the NPOs who are identified to be at low risk, we just implement simplified measures in terms of monitoring that's requiring information, or offsite monitoring can be sufficient, and so that only focused monitoring is implemented on those NPOs that are identified to be at high risk. And the focus also is to work with them, to support them in order to help them to become aware of the risks that are associated with them for terrorist financing, and to help them put in measures that will help to reduce the risk associated with TF. And so we are ensuring that we appreciate and understand the revised FATF requirements, so that then we are able to implement the requirements as indicated. So we work with various stakeholders in the implementation of the FATF requirements, that is both local and international. And that is why we are very grateful for this opportunity also, that we can continue sharing information regarding these updates, so that we implement in the right way. So once the risk assessment that is ongoing is completed, then we'll be able to work toward developing a risk-based approach to supervision of the NPOs. Just to give a background on how this process is going on, that the methodology we're using requires that we engage all the relevant stakeholders in the process, so that the outcome will be able to be owned by all the stakeholders, and every NPOs, they appreciate, they understand the results of the risk assessment. And so we have established what we have called an oversight committee, ensuring that all the relevant stakeholders participate, and the NPOs and all the competent authorities are part of the oversight committee, oversight body, ensuring that we have all the information that is required from the relevant stakeholders, and the results of the assessment then should be able to be owned by the relevant stakeholders. And so to respond to the matter related to how then are we going to do this or implement the updated FATF requirements that disrupting the sector, we are very mindful of this, and we know that if we implement the sector without much knowledge, much appreciation, much understanding, then we'll be able to disrupt the activities and bring about burdensome requirements. And so that is why we are focusing on ensuring that we engage all the relevant stakeholders so that the results of the risk assessment we are undertaking should be able to be owned by everyone, by all the stakeholders. In terms of the stakeholders we are working with now, we have the NGO Act provides for the Council of NGOs. This is the body that is established and composed of non-governmental organizations, and as an institution under the NGO Act. That's a statutory body under the NGO Act, which is composed of non-governmental organizations. And so the Department of Registrar for NGOs and the other competent authorities work with the Council of NGOs in coordinating the NGOs and ensuring full participation in the policy making and consultation related to matters to deal with terrorist financing. The NGO umbrella bodies also, for instance, the International NGO Forum, and we are very happy also to mention that we have the Zambia Council for Social Development as well, which has been participating under the NPO coalition on FATF matters. They are also been actively participating in these matters. So we try to ensure that we consult these NPOs through these established structures in terms of ensuring that none of the stakeholders remain behind, but we are all moving together for the purpose of ensuring that the direction we are taking does not bring burdensome requirements on NPOs. Of course, we know that, as also acknowledged by FATF, that sometimes, unfortunately, NPOs may be abused for terrorist financing, but the idea is that now, how do we empower them so that they are able to identify and even report on whatever they think may be terrorist financing, or someone may wish to abuse them for that purpose. Of course, I should mention that NPOs are not reporting entities according to our laws. Initially, they were designated as reporting entities, but the laws were revised, so NPOs are not reporting entities, but they are able to share information when they suspect them that they may be used for terrorist financing purposes. And so that kind of collaboration gives us hope that we are going to implement the updated FATF requirements on Recommendation 8 and its interpretative note, that we will work together with NPOs and ensure that its implementation does not bring any unwanted consequences regarding its implementation. So we have been working with NPOs. For instance, in 2022, the department worked with NPO to develop the standards and guidance for NPOs, which also had a significant portion relating to how NPOs may protect themselves from terrorist financing abuse. And so NPOs, through the structures which are established, actively participated in that regard. And so the country will continue engaging NPOs in this regard, using the established structure to ensure that they participate in the oversight, in the policy consultations and implementations. We, as a country, For instance, we, as a result of implementing the FATF requirement, we have not experienced any unintended consequences relating to implementation of the FATF Recommendation 8. However, we know that we have received feedback regarding enhanced due diligence or requirements by financial institutions when, for instance, NPOs are opening bank accounts, operating bank accounts. And so we have been engaging with financial institutions, working together to help also them appreciate, understand that not all NPOs, of course, are at risk of terrorist financing. Others actually represent little or no risk at all. However, we continue with outreach to both the financial institutions in terms of working together as they implement their risk measures in protecting the financial institutions from also being used in this process. So we work together with financial institutions in ensuring that they also appreciate and understand, and where they are not clear, we engage so that NPOs are not inconvenienced as they try to implement their humanitarian, social, or religious activities in the country, but they're able to undertake their activities unimpeded, as we also ensuring that we are putting in the measures related to protecting them from terrorist financing abuse. And so in terms of the measures that how we are going to...
Mr. Mketeke, I hope you are wrapping up. Kindly.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, indeed. So in terms of how we wish going forward to implement the updated requirements of Recommendation 8, definitely we will have to continue working with the NPOs, working with the stakeholders, and complete the risk assessment. So once the risk assessment is completed, then we are, in that case, we are very much aware of where the risks lie. We have identified the risks and develop and implement the risk-based approach to monitoring of NPOs. Of course, now we are no longer talking about supervision, but we are talking about oversight and monitoring so that we identify those NPOs that are at high risk of terrorist financing and work with them in order for them to also implement measures that will help them to mitigate the risks that will be associated with them for terrorist financing. And so we want to make sure that this engagement with NPOs continues with using the established structures, and we believe that that will help us to implement this requirement without bringing about more complications or burdensome requirements for the NPOs, but also ensuring that they are protected from being abused for terrorist financing. And so we are very, very grateful for this opportunity and the lessons we are learning from Uganda, we have learned from the presentations. And so we will continue learning. And so, Yona, we are very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mketeke, for that very precise presentation. I'm happy to learn from the Q&As and also in the chat room that participants are thanking all of you for well-thought presentation that have highlighted key issues in the revised version of Recommendation 8 and the interpretative notes. I'll request actually the technical team to post these links in the chat room for the participants to access some of these links and get a deeper dive and understanding into the revised Recommendation 8 and the interpretative notes, then the best practice papers. Thank you to all who have already typed their questions in. I think most of the questions go to Mr. Stephen Okello. And I'm going to read all of the questions. Feel free to see which one you'd begin with. And also, I think there are some questions for Mr. Mketeke. The first question is by Frederick Okado from Kenya. He's interested in understanding that why does the NGO Bureau usually suspend human rights organization and governance NGOs towards the elections in Uganda, and why are NGOs reporting entities? That was from Fredericks to Stephen. The other question to Stephen is that, well, this one also thanked for the very insightful presentation, but he's interested in understanding what is the reason behind registering as a company before registering as an NGO. And if I'm filing the annual returns, which entity is applicable to receive my filing? That is from Kansime Gilbert. Horizon Asaba is asking, good afternoon, panelists. My question to you is, why are NGO listed as reporting entities? I think, again, this goes to Stephen Okello, because in the presentation of Mr. Mketeke, he clarified that NPOs are not reporting persons attendant to the amendments of the laws in Zambia. Let us see, Robert from Botswana is asking, again, the same question. Why are NPOs listed as reporting entities? And what measures are countries taking to delist them? I think the interest is into why reporting entity. Then we have an anonymous participant who has thanked again Stephen for thoughtful presentation, but he's inquiring whether within the categories, let's say within the faith-based organization, the risk assessment identified the entire subset to be high risk. And also, the anonymous attendee wanted to know, how did Uganda zero on the high-risk entity? So this, I think, is a process and procedure issue. Allow me read the additional two, and perhaps I give a chance back to you. FATF recommendation, again, this by Robert Busura. FATF recommendation 33 requires that countries provide data on their compliance with the standards. Are there data points on the actual TF in Uganda, if any, of the countries in the region, so that the decisions around compliance with the recommendation 8 and the interpretative note 8 are data-based? Yeah, this Robert wants actually to know either it is data-based or evidence-based, or I think, again, both of you feel free to highlight on that. Maybe I give a chance to the panelists to give a shot on those few questions. Some have been specific, some are general. Thank you. Over to Mr. Stephen Okello and Mr. Mketeke.
Yes, thank you so much, Yona. And also I want to thank the participants for the questions they have raised. I think let me go through them very fast. The first question you put forward is from Frederick Okado from Mohari, Kenya, who is asking, why are we usually suspending NGOs and freezing their accounts, mainly the human rights and the governance NGOs towards elections? I think that is not a correct position, because if you see the actions and the sanctions either the Bureau takes, it's not something that has to wait for an election period. We always take our decisions based on what we are addressing. But also to try and give a clarification, the NGO Bureau is not only a regulator of the NPO sector, but it's also an enabler. We are there to support the sector also grow. That means that much as you may hear of the sanctions the Bureau is taking, it doesn't mean that the Bureau is not supporting the sector in so many ways, because our interest is that the sector should grow and should have the right capacity in carrying out its work. But also to add, the Bureau does not witch hunt or is not after any particular NGO, regardless of the objectives. So whether you're in governance, whether you're in human rights, we are not there to witch hunt any organization. But also overall, we do not discriminate. We do not say we are favoring this category of NGOs. No. So we are a non-discriminatory entity. And that means that we treat all organizations the same. And of course, overall, we should take note that there are laws that are governing the sector, just as I presented. We have the NGO Act 2016, the NGO Policy 2010, and then we have the regulations 2017. All these introduce legal obligations that any NGO registered in this country must comply with. And of course, I think some of the suspensions you have heard of mainly fall in three categories. One is that either an NGO is operating without formalizing the operations, they don't have any instrument to show where they're registered within the country, and that one, the laws put a mandate on the Bureau to ensure that they are not operating. And under our section 31 of the NGO Act, that also requires that you must be having a valid permit, meaning that if you're issued with a permit and it expires and you have not renewed it, then we have a duty to ensure that we are stopping your operations. But of course, also failure to file returns. There's no way an NGO can operate out there and it's not availing information on its operations to the regulator. Now, that information gap poses a lot of risks. So those are some of the reasons that I'm pointing out. So overall, to Frederick, we are not witch hunting in organizations. We do not only become active towards elections. No, even right now we are working. We are doing a lot of things in the background. It doesn't mean that we're only waiting for elections to follow up either human rights organizations or even the ones in governance issues. The second question is from Mofoke. I think I did not get the rest of the names. That within the faith-based organizations is the entire subset at high risk? I think I clarified on that. The answer is no. Not all the faith-based organizations in the country are high risk. And also, as indicated earlier, the overall assessment of the NPO sector in Uganda, that means NGOs, CBOs, trusts, and FBOs, is that it is low. That means that we do not have to worry much of the overall sector. But of course, within the law, there's also those that are high risk. So overall, not all faith-based organizations fall within that category. It's only the madrasas that fall there. But for these madrasas, we already have an outreach plan in ensuring that we are following up the operations and knowing that since they're high risk, we need to know what they're doing. Now, there are questions that I think Robert, Harrison Asaba, and then again, Frederick Okade all asked the same question. Why are NGOs listed as reporting entities? Now, the NGOs appear in the second schedule of the Anti-Money Laundering Act 2013 as accountable person. And of course, there are reasons why they were put there at that time. And I think the government at that time looked at the vulnerabilities, the threats, and the risks involved in order to put them there. So it was based on the circumstances as per 2013. But of course, I'd also indicated that there has been an appeal to the government to also try and reconsider and see if NGOs or NPOs can be removed from the list of accountable persons. So as NGO Bureau, we are one of the stakeholders already consulted and so many other stakeholders. And I'm very sure that there's a process ongoing. We are aware that after consultations have been concluded by the management at the Financial Intelligence Authority, they're going to present it to their board. Their board is going to see what everyone feels. If they should be removed from the second schedule of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, then that is going to take place. So let's just hope that they're going to be considered and finally removed from the second schedule. The fourth question came in from Richard. Do NGOs or NPOs in Uganda currently pose a terrorist financing risk? I'd already responded to that. Generally, the risk level is low. However, within the law, much as I had mentioned only madrasas, there's also another category that the NGOs that are operating close to the borders where there's insecurity. Like in Uganda, there's a part of the country where we have rebel activities that is between the DRC and Uganda. According to the risk assessment, it was found that those, even within the law, just like madrasas, still pose a risk. So overall, the risk level is low, but only those two categories are the ones we are paying attention to. And as I indicated, we already have outreach programs in place where we are following up the operations to ensure that we are looking at what exactly they are doing so that the risk levels do not go any higher than that. The fifth and last question, Consime Gilbert, you're asking why register as a company limited guarantee before coming to the NGO bureau. Now, the reason why it is important that you first incorporate as a company is because you need to become a legal entity. You need to become a body corporate, meaning that you are going to execute some activities in your own capacity. Meaning that if you must transact, you must be a body corporate. You're going to enter into partnership agreements, you're going to rent premises, you're going to execute activities with different beneficiaries and stakeholders. You need to be a body corporate. So that's why the laws in Uganda require that before you proceed to the NGO bureau, you must first proceed and incorporate. But of course, those are mainly the indigenous ones that are already within the country. There are those that are coming from out of the country that are already incorporated. Those ones are not required to incorporate again. They just proceed to the NGO bureau and proceed with the registration. Of course, there are those who also proceed to the incorporating body, not to incorporate, but to register and then proceed to the regulator. So I think I'm just looking at the time. I think I have answered all that. But of course, there was also a question about the returns. Are they supposed to file returns in all the offices? I think currently the answer is yes. If you're incorporated, you need to file both at the incorporating body, and that's Uganda Registered Services Bureau, but also you have to file returns at the NGO Bureau. I had indicated that one of our top priorities right now is automation. The moment we automate all our systems, we are then going to try and eliminate some of those multiple reporting areas because they cause a lot of fatigue to the actors in the sector because they have to run to all these entities filing the same documents. So our plan is that once we fully automate, the different entities are going to integrate the system so that you just have to file only in one location, such that if you're an NGO, file with the NGO bureau, then the other key stakeholders that want to use that information can always pick it from the NGO bureau. I am aware that the incorporating body, URSB, has already fully automated. Entities like Financial Intelligence Authority are fully automated, and so many government entities. So the NGO bureau is actually doing everything to fully automate so that we can integrate our systems and ensure that we are not giving all these reporting burdens on the sector. So, Yona, I think I've tried to answer as fast as I can within the time. Let me also give my colleague an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. I request participants to allow us only 15 minutes. We should be done in the next 15 minutes, if that's okay. Thank you for your consideration in advance. Can I take this opportunity now to give the mic to Mr. Mketeke? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yona. I will just provide comments on 3 questions. I think I'll comment on Harrison and Robert. I think they asked about reporting entities, which my colleague responded. Just to add that, like he said, obviously the circumstances at the time will dictate or guide whether NPOs are listed as reporting entities. But of course, that is according to the FATF requirement, that is not the direction we should take. And just to comment that sometimes it's interpretations of the FATF requirements which may lead to maybe jurisdictions to enlist NPOs as reporting entities or designate them. Like the case for Zambia, I think it had to do, it was to do with interpretations of the FATF requirements at the time, and that's why it was easy. Once we went through again the requirements, the FATF requirements, we were able to easily move and remove NPOs from being reporting entities, and so that was the case. So it had to do, I think it was to do with interpretations of the FATF requirements, and so that's why we're able to remove them from them being listed as reporting entities, and which is the case now. NPOs are not reporting entities. And also the second one, I think Patrick asked a question regarding the unintended consequences, that how did we determine that there were no unintended consequences of the implementation of the FATF requirements when we had not undertaken the risk assessment. Just like I indicated, we first of all undertook the national risk assessment in 2016 and the sectoral risk assessment in 2020. So in both, in 2020, we didn't identify any unintended consequences directly related to implementation of the FATF requirements. That's the interaction we had with NPOs and also during our outreach engagements. However, like I mentioned, that we have had reports of NPOs having challenges or enhanced diligence from the financial authority, financial institutions regarding opening of bank accounts and operation of bank accounts. And so we have been engaging. Of course, this is coming from different aspects. Also, the financial institutions wanting to make sure that they know their clients and they provide the necessary information required. However, we have been engaging with the financial institutions, trying to make sure that we support the NPOs as a regulator. Like my colleague mentioned, we are not just regulators, we're also enablers and trying to support NPOs, ensuring that they undertake their mandate in supplementing government efforts. So we've been engaging in that regard. So at the moment, we cannot directly pinpoint to say this has been this consequence or unintended consequence directly related to implementation of the FATF requirement. And lastly, just to comment the question on company NPOs registering as companies limited by or a company, incorporated company under NPO. Yeah, I think like my colleague said, even in Zambia we have that situation also, because for instance the NPO law at the moment, the NGO Act does not create legal entities, and so NPOs must incorporate so that they obtain the legal personality to be able to engage in various acts such as owning property and undertaking other activities, which the NPO registration itself alone may not grant them that. So we have that arrangement also. And just to mention that the laws are also undergoing review to ensure that they speak to each other and we reduce on the requirements in terms of establishing an NPO and operating it in Zambia. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mketeke. Thank you, Stephen. I know we have used up our time and we are on the bonus, but I think there are certain things perhaps participants would still want to listen in. One of the questions from Douglas, which I'm pulling out here, is what role and obligation does the NGO Bureau have in regulating companies not registered with the NGO Bureau? I think this is to Stephen, Mr. Stephen Okello. But if at all it's the same situation in Zambia, we shall be happy also to learn what is the role on companies that that are not registered by you. The other question is by attendee, anonymous attendee, which I thought should be highlighted here, is that how do these countries, how are they dealing with the issue of beneficial ownership, since there is no owner of the NPOs? Who is considered in this capacity as a beneficial owner? So I think Mr. Stephen and Keteke help us highlight, but I think this is one of the key issue again that is coming on board, the misapplication of Recommendation 24, Recommendation 25 of FATF in registering and renewing the operations of the NPO. So how are you dealing in your respective country with this particular legislation on beneficial ownership? Over to you. I encourage participants to continue sharing again their questions. We are going to compile them, then follow up these regulators, and we shall share their response again with you. Thank you. Over to Stephen and Mr. Mketeke.
Yes, thank you so much, Moderator Yona, and also thanks to the participants for the additional questions. I think to Douglas, you're asking what is the role of the NGO Bureau when it comes to those companies that are incorporated at URSB and are not registered at the NGO Bureau. Now, to give clarification, first is that not all companies incorporated at URSB are supposed to be proceeding to the NGO Bureau. We have those that are limited by shares who do not come, but also there are those that are limited by guarantee that our laws do not require them to proceed to the NGO Bureau, like the trade unions, the ones having microfinance elements. There are those that are professional bodies. Those ones can continue to operate without proceeding to the NGO Bureau. However, Section 31, subsection 2 of the NGO Act 2016 responds to that particular area, whereby if you're a company limited by guarantee that is incorporated at let me say URSB, the incorporating body, or you are an organization that proceeded to the Trustees Incorporation Act and incorporated your trustees, and you fall within the definition of what an NGO is in Uganda, you have a legal obligation to proceed to the NGO Bureau. Because now, because if the NGO Bureau is conducting its monitoring and inspections and it comes across you and you're out there operating, you have incorporated, yes, which permits you, yes, you're a legal entity, but you have not complied with the section 31, subsection 2. Then, actually subsection 1 and 2, then they are going to really have to stop your operations because you have not completed the process. You started the process, you incorporated, because every NGO operating in Uganda that falls within that definition must have 3 documents before they're out there operating. You should have been incorporated. You must be having a certificate of registration showing you appear on the National Register of all NGOs in the country. Then you must be having a valid permit, not just a permit, but a valid permit. So it means that you must have those 3, then you can be allowed to operate. So the exceptions to those that it does not apply to, but the categories it applies to must proceed to the NGO Bureau, and NGO Bureau can take action against them once they come across them. Now, the second question was the issue of beneficial ownership. Of course, the NGO Bureau is affected in that under beneficial ownership, you are targeting mainly the people own and control these NGOs. I have actually already, I'm in talks with my colleagues at our incorporating body where issues of beneficial ownership are addressed. We are supposed to have a thorough conversation when it comes to issues of beneficial ownership. But for now, what has been considered is that founder members of these entities are the ones actually who are being considered as beneficial owners. Now, the challenge it is posing to a number of NGOs that I see coming out already from the question, which we already are appreciating and we are going to discuss with our incorporating body, is that once someone has founded an NGO or an NPO, they then, after registering with the Bureau, they then decide whether to go into the management or the governing component. And that means that the founder members are not even key anymore to the operations of this organization. We have a number of challenges where some NGOs say, okay, our founder members passed on, they're already buried. How do we get details of their beneficial ownership? But also we have a category of those who can't even be traced. I started an NGO with a group of people. I have moved to any part of the world. No one knows where I am. That means that the entity cannot fully comply. So we are going to have talks with the incorporating body to see, are there exceptions in addition to the founder members, or do we have to make adjustments and not restrict it to the founder members? Do we have to move it to the governing body such that if you're members of a board, are you the ones that we consider to be the beneficial owners at that time? Because you're actually in charge, you are controlling, you are taking decisions. So this issue of beneficial ownership, we are also following conversations around the globe. So many things is introducing. So as Uganda, in relation to the question being asked, we're also going to further unpack it, and then we see how best to help the sector. Yeah, thank you so much, Yona. Yes.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Stephen, and thank you, Mr. Mketeke. I think we are only remaining with 3 minutes. I would like to give a chance to only one person to ask the question. I'm seeing only one hand, that is Florido. Florido, be precise, either with a question or comment. After that, if it does not require a response, then we ask for parting shots. Over to you, Florido.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and experiences about the recommendation number 8. I don't have any question moment, but once again, thank you for the presentation, for sharing your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Florindo. I think we have some time saved. Any parting shots from Mr. Stephen Okello and Mr. Mketeke in 1 minute? Hello, Stephen. Any parting shots? Mr. Mketeke, any parting shots?
Yes, I think from me, I think I want to thank you, the moderator, and also the entire team for inviting us. This has been a very useful engagement, and I also hope all the participants, both within Uganda and out of the country, and within East Africa and other parts of Africa, have all benefited from this engagement. I just request that we have more such engagements because they help us build the capacity of all the stakeholders and to bring everyone on board. So I want to just thank you so much. And also, as I emphasized, that this is a collective and shared responsibility. It's not only about the NGO bill in Uganda, but it has all the stakeholders and actors on board. So we are all doing it for the good of our countries to ensure that we are protecting the sector. So overall, thank you so much for giving me such an opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mketeke.
Yeah, so thank you very much. First, to thank DPI for the opportunity to share our experiences and to learn. Thank you to Stephen for the Ugandan experience, and the participants for the questions. We have appreciated, and they help us to refine our implementation of measures and coming up with measures. So we're very grateful for the questions. We have taken note. We'll continue.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
The way we implement.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, Mr. Mketeke. I think there is a challenge with a connection over that side. Thank you to participants who have attended overwhelmingly and also sustained their presence online from the time we started up to this long. We at Defenders Protection Initiative and at the Civic Advisory Hub, again, we take this opportunity to thank our key panelists who have shared with us a wealth of knowledge, but also been able to address our concern in the Q&A. At Defenders Protection Initiative and the Civic Advisory Hub, we are going to maintain these virtual engagement bi-monthly. So expect the next virtual engagement for the regional or for the continent, that is in April. And this should be focusing on key aspects that you are going actually to include in our evaluation of the event. Should you want a particular aspect to be handled, like now the key aspect of beneficial owner is coming on board and more, they should inform our next focus. I know, again, the Civic Advisory Hub and Defenders Protection Initiative is going to also, again, arrange in-person engagement, in-person trainings within the Eastern Southern Africa region and also stretch other parts of the continent. We shall be happy to contact you during these engagements. I request you, or I also encourage you to stay online next week because the plenary is sitting, I think, around the 19th to 24th. You get to know the position of your country. Are you joining the gray list or you are leaving the gray list? Is your country complying with the recommendation 8 or it's not complying? As you might have known, over 11 countries in Africa are on the gray list. And this gray list, the FATF gray list, throws every country into panic. And that's why sometimes we have these disruptions that affect the sector. Together, we can desecuritize civic space and safeguard civic space. Thanks to everyone. We shall be sharing the audio, the recorded version of this webinar, but also help us to respond to the survey that has been put in the chat room. Thank you and have a very blessed day. Yes, they've posted the evaluation of the webinar. Please take 3 to 5 minutes to respond to it. Hi, everyone. Thanks once again, and bye. For non-Ugandans, you're welcome to the Pearl of Africa, and you visit us at our offices. And for those outside Uganda, I know we shall meet before the end of the year on the same topics. Bye.